Hi, third graders. Welcome back to your TV classroom. Today is Thursday, February 11th. Thursday. It's the day before Friday. How are you today? How are you feeling? What zone are you in?
Good.
Are you feeling good, Mr. Kevin?
I'm in the good zone.
You're in the good zone? Oh, that's awesome. Today, I'm kind of feeling a mixture of zones. Oliver did not sleep great last night, so I'm a little in the blue zone. My emotions feel stable. I feel fine. My brain is tired and a little scattered, but not too scattered. So I'm like a teal, a bluey green. How are you, Mr. Kevin? What zone are you in today?
Well, like I said, I'm good. I'm in a green zone.
Nice.
Feel pretty good. I slept well last night.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Good, great.
Yeah.
Friends, how are you feeling at home? What zone are you in? Thanks for sharing. Make sure if there's someone around you that you ask them what zone they're in and see how they're feeling. It's always nice when someone asks you how you're feeling. It makes you feel like they care about you, and that helps us spread peace and kindness to each other. So, not only tell them your zone, but maybe ask them what theirs is too. So let's get going with what's missing Thursday. Now, as I always say on Thursdays, what's missing is only part of it. We first have to figure out what we know. Let's take a look at this first slide. What do we know by looking at this equation? What was that, Pebble? Yeah, Pebble says there's 10 groups. Okay, so I'm gonna have 10 groups. What else do we know? Thanks, Rafa. Rafa said we have 10 in all. So if I have 10 groups, how many in each group will I have if I have 10 total? Well, 1. Now, we're going to be using this, and I want you to look at it for a second. 10 times 1 is 10. So I multiplied 10 by this number here, 1, and that 1 is in the tens place. Interesting. Now I have 10 times something equals 250. I have 10 groups of something to make 250. 10 times 1 kind of helps. I want to use a different fact to help you. What about this? 10 times 5, oh, this is wobbly today, equals 50. What do you notice? Yes, if I multiply by 5, that number ends up going in the tens place. Oh. So 10 by something is going to equal 250. So I've got this number right here, 25. I wonder if I put 25 here, if that would work. 10 groups of 25. Well, I know 4 groups of 25 is 100. So 8 groups of 25 is 200. And 2 groups of 25 is 50. Be 10 groups of 25. That worked. When we multiply by 10, we put the number that we multiplied 10 by in the tens and hundreds place, and then keep the 0 in the ones place. That's interesting. Let's try it for here. If that works, what would we put here? 10 groups of what? To make 350. Well, there's 5 in the tens place and 3 in the hundreds place. 35 tens, right? 10 groups of 35 equals 350. It's true. Okay, so then what would this one be? What would that one be? I am trying to make this so it stops wobbling on me. 10 groups of 50 equals 500, right? 50, 100, like if you keep going, 10 groups of 50 is going to equal 500. Oh my. What would we do here? What do you think is missing? You could divide. You could say 1,000 divided by 10. Or you could use what we just learned. There's only one zero here, so that zero stays the same. And then we just multiply by all the tens, hundreds, and thousands. This would be 100. 10 times 100 equals 1,000. Think about it. 10 groups of 100 equals 1,000. Well, if 10 groups of 1 equals 10, and 10 groups of 10 equals 100, then 10 groups of 100 is going to be the next place value, which is 1,000. Yes, Mr. Kevin?
I just had a thought.
Yeah, what's your thought?
What if each one equaled an M&M?
Oh my.
1,000
M&Ms. That would give me a tummy ache. That's a lot of M&Ms. We could share them with all our friends. That would be fun. We could figure out how many each friend would get depending on how many friends there were. We could make a really fun math problem out of that. Today, we are learning to solve problems about equal groups. We could totally make an M&M math problem about equal groups with 1,000 M&Ms. That would be very fun to do. In fact, if you make one up, send it here to the TV classroom at the end. We'll tell you how to do that. So, we're learning to solve problems about equal groups. So let's look at this first problem. Jeremy wants 3 equal-sized teams. Okay, so he wants to have 3 teams. He has 21 players. How many will be on each team? Well, we need to 3-read. It's a story problem. We 3-read story problems so we don't get confused on what it's asking. So, there's someone who wants some equal-sized teams. That's what's happening. What's our question? Jeremy wants 3 equal-sized teams. He has 21 players. How many will be on each team? What's the question here? Yeah, how many will be on each team? Okay. What information do we have to help us? Let's read. Jeremy wants 3 equal-sized teams. He has 21 players. What's the information we have? We know we have 3 teams, we have 3 groups, and we know we have a total of 21 players. Think about what we just did in the what's missing. We had groups and then the total. We were finding out how many in each group. Write an equation you could use to solve this problem. Use a question mark for the unknown number. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds. Go ahead and figure out the equation you would write to solve this problem. There are a few different options you could use. Mr. Kevin, can you show my whiteboard?
Got it.
So I have 3 groups of something equals 21. So I could use that equation. Or I could use the equation 21 divided by 3 groups equals how many in each of the groups? Either of those would work. Does anyone know how many players would be on each team by using their equation? 3 times what is 21? What's that fact? 3 times? Yes, 3 times 7 is 21. If 3 times 7 is 21, then what's 21 divided by 3? It's 7. So we would have 7 people on each team. Okay. Now, I couldn't get this any bigger, so we'll go just the full screen, Mr. Kevin, with the PowerPoint. It's kind of small, so I'm going to read it out loud slowly for you and do the highlighting, and I apologize, it's small. There wasn't much I could do about it. So, a store has 24 saltwater fish. The store has 4 tanks for the fish. Each tank has an equal number of fish. How many fish are in each tank? Do not pick up your pencils and your pens. Put them down, third graders. I just want you to listen and tell me what's happening in this story problem. Yeah, Rafa. Rafa said, well, there's a pet store and they've got tanks and they have fish. And they're trying to figure out how many fish are in each tank. Great. Okay, let's read and find the question together. A store has 24 saltwater fish. The store has 4 tanks for the fish. Each tank has an equal number of fish. How many fish are in the tank? What's our question? How many fish are in each tank? Okay, now let's look at the information we can use to solve this problem. I'm going to read it again. A store has 24 saltwater fish. The store has 4 tanks for the fish. Each tank has an equal number of fish. What's the important information that we need to solve this problem? Yeah, the total number of fish, which is how many? There's 24 saltwater fish. Okay. The number of tanks, 4 tanks. And it says how many fish are in each tank. Now, there's one more important piece of information, because with the way we're reading this, I could add 4 add-ins that are all different, right? I could do like 10 in one tank, 10 in the other, 1 in one tank, and 3 in the other tank. And that would get me 24 fish in 4 tanks. There's an important piece here. Who sees it? Yeah, each tank is equal number of fish. So that's important. We're not going to solve yet. What I'd like you to do is draw a model. Draw a model and then solve. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to attempt this problem on your own. Go ahead. Get working. All right, friends, what I'd like you to do is, even if you haven't finished solving, that's okay. Put your pencil or marker or whatever you're using to write down, and I want you to share with someone around you or with your learning buddy what you did to solve this problem or where you're at in the solving process. We are going to find the answer together, so if you're not finished, that is okay. All right? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to share with someone around you or with your learning buddy, or if you don't have your learning buddy, then just say it out loud. It's important to talk about your math out loud to see if it makes sense. Go ahead, do that now. All right, friends, let's take a look at some ways we could have solved this problem. You can use a drawing to show and solve problems about equal groups. You can make 4 groups of 1 fish each and add 1 fish at a time to each group until there are 24 fish. We call this sharing out. So I don't know if you've ever like had friends that you're playing and you're sharing out, I don't know, M&Ms, and you're like, you get an M&M, you get an M&M, you get an M&M, I get an M&M, you get an M&M, you get an M&M, you get an M&M, I get an M&M, until they're all gone. Until everyone has the same amount. And if there's any leftovers, you just kind of put them off to the side. That's one way to do that. So how many fish were in each tank with 4 tanks? 6. We can just count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we could say there are 6 fish in each tank. Okay, that's one way to solve this problem. You can also use words to show how you solve the problem about equal groups. You can write down notes, 24 fish in all, 4 groups or tanks, question mark fish in each group, and then use an equation to help you. This looks very much like the equation, just different numbers, that we did at the beginning of the problem. 4 times question mark equals 24, or 24 divided by 4 equals question mark. And as a mathematician, what I think when I see this right here is I think, what fact do I know equals 24 with 4? 4 times 6 equals 24. So 24 divided by 4 equals 6. There must be 6 fish in each tank. That's another way to solve it. So what does 24 stand for in this problem? What is the 24? It's the total in all. It's how many things you have altogether in your large quantity. What does the 4 stand for? The 4 in this problem is the number of groups. What's the question mark standing for? Yeah, how many in each group? It says use the letter F to stand for the unknown number, because F stands for fish. So we would do this. 24 divided by 4 equals F. What would be the multiplication problem with F standing for the unknown number? Write that now on your whiteboard. Mr. Kevin, can you show them my whiteboard?
I will.
You should have written 4 times F equals 24. That means 4 tanks of an amount of fish equals 24 total fish. What was the solution? What did we figure out? Using these strategies, what did we figure out? How many fish were in each tank? Yeah, 6. 4 times 6 equals 24. So there are 6 fish in each tank. Now, just the PowerPoint now, Mr. Kevin? Now we're going to pretend that it's changed. The problem is there are 24 fish. The store manager wants to put 6 fish in each tank. How many tanks will there be? How does that change our equation? And use T for tank. See if you can write the multiplication and the division problem equation that would represent this story. It's just a very small change. There are 24 fish. There are 6 fish in each tank. How many tanks are there? Okay, Mr. Kevin, my whiteboard, please. Now I'm going to talk you through this. We'll kind of do it together, but I'm giving you a few seconds to see if you can get it on. So I know that when I say groups of, I know this number is how many groups, and I know this number is how many in each group. So I think about the information I have, and I know that my total is here, or my total goes here. And in this problem, they give me the total first. So I'm actually going to put 24 equals blank groups of blank. There are 6 fish in each tank. Where is 6 going to go? Yeah, right here. where is T going to go? Yeah, right here. Ta-da! 24 equals T times 6. Now, friends, we're going to skip over to our assignment. I'm going to come back to this tomorrow because I think it's important that we work through those problems together. And I'm okay with doing one lesson for 2 days. So what I would like you to do, instead of doing these assignment pages, I'll assign them at the end of when we're finished with the lesson. What I would like you to do is I would like you to write your own problem that has to do with a total amount, and you know the number of groups and figure out the number in each group, or total amount and you don't know the number of groups, but you know how many are in each group. And create that assignment, write that story problem, then solve it, and either give it to your teacher or send it to us here at the TV classroom. Now, today, we started learning to solve problems about equal groups. We understood the situation, we created models, we started using equations to help us solve the problem, and we were answering with a statement using the unit, fish, tanks, right? Mr. Kevin, can you tell them how they can send their problem here to the TV classroom?
Absolutely. How many fish are in your tank, kids? Send us the answer to TV Classroom at tacoma.k12.wa.us, or you can mail it always to TV Classroom at 601 South 8th Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98405.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kevin. Now, friends, it's time for your break. You will need to have your Learning Buddy, your ELA packet, your pencil ready to go for your time with Miss Oslin. Make sure to take a break, stretch your legs, get a drink of water, enjoy the break content we have for you, and then be back when she's on the screen ready to learn. Have a great Thursday, friends. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Rules. 1. You have 10 seconds to pick your crewmate. 2. A new timer will appear with an exercise for the crewmate you picked. 3. You will get 10 points for each correct crewmate and exercise you choose. 4. If you pick the imposter, you will lose all your points. 5. See how many points you can get. Good luck.
third graders, welcome back from your break. I see that you have gathered all of your materials. Excellent job. Go ahead and put those off to the side. You can keep your learning buddy with you if that is going to help you focus. Let's remind ourselves of our 3 personal standards. Today and every day when we come together, we agree to show respect, make good decisions, and solve problems. Now, we started learning all about Patricia Polacco, who's an author, and we're going to study her during this writing unit. And we discovered that Patricia Polacco is a great storyteller. She tells stories about her childhood. She uses amazing illustrations to help support the words to tell her stories. She enjoys remembering and sharing experiences in her life, and some of them are good, and some of them weren't such good experiences for her. And the experiences in the lives of her friends and her family. And in these books that we are reading, for example, something about Hensley's, it's about when she is growing up and she goes into the store, the Hensley's, and they have everything. And look at the details in that cover. I see candy, I see a bird there, not sure about that. I see toys in the background. She writes about the struggles of herself growing up and of her characters, and how they have to overcome these obstacles through the help of some very special people in their lives. We read Thank You, Mr. Falker, and in this book, the character, Tricia, can't read because she has dyslexia until she met her teacher, Mr. Falker, who is there and knows how to help her overcome this obstacle. So today we're going to learn where Patricia Polacco finds inspiration for her stories. That means, where do these ideas come from? Thank You, Mr. Falker by Patricia Polacco. The grandpa held the jar of honey so that all the family could see, then dipped a ladle into it and drizzled honey on the cover of a small book. The little girl had just turned 5. "Stand up, little one," he cooed. "I did this for your mother, your uncles, your older brother, and now you." Then he handed the book to her. "Taste." She dipped her finger into the honey and put it into her mouth. "What is that taste?" the grandma asked. The little girl answered, "Sweet." Then all of the family said in a single voice, "Yes, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee that made that honey, that sweet honey. You have to chase it through the pages of a book." The little girl knew that the promise to read was at last hers. Soon, she was going to learn to read. Now, I'm noticing how important reading is to Tricia's family, because of all of the rituals. They're putting honey on a book and talking about it. They have this saying that they're all saying together, which is, "Yes, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee that made that sweet honey. You have to chase it through the pages of a book." Tricia, the littlest girl in the family, grew up loving books. Her school teacher mother read to her every night. Her redheaded brother brought his books home from school and shared them. And whenever she visited the family farm, her grandfather or grandmother read to her by the stone fireplace. When she turned 5 and went to kindergarten, most of all, she hoped to read. Each day she saw the kids in the first grade across the hall reading, and before the year was over, some of the kids in her own class began to read. Not Tricia. Still, she loved being at school because she could draw. The other kids would crowd around her and watch her do her magic with the crayons. "In first grade, you will learn to read," her brother said. In first grade, Tricia sat in a circle with the other kids. They were all holding Our Neighborhood, their first reader, sounding out letters and words. They said b, oi, boy, and ook, look. The teacher smiled at them when they pulled all the sounds together and got a word right. But when Tricia looked at the page, all she saw were wiggly shapes, and when she tried to sound out words, the other kids laughed at her. "Tricia, what are you looking at in that book?" they'd say. "I'm reading," she'd say back to them. But her teacher would move on to the next person. Always, when it was her turn to read, her teacher had to help her with every single word. And while the other kids moved up into the second reader and third reader, they stayed alone in our neighborhood. Tricia often began to feel different. She began to feel dumb. Now, we talked about how Patricia Polacco tells really honest stories and how this wasn't a very pleasant experience for her as a child, but it's important to tell honest stories so that other people who are reading the story can see themselves in the story. They can say, hey, that character is like me. And this teacher, even though this teacher doesn't seem to just kind of moved on and didn't really seem to know how to help Tricia and made Tricia feel dumb, it's still important to include those people that have influenced our characters in our stories. The harder words got for the little girl, the more and more time she spent drawing, how she loved to draw, or just sitting and dreaming, or when she could, going for walks with her grandmother. One summer day, she and her grandma were walking together in the small woods behind their farm. It was twilight. The air was sweet and warm. Fireflies were just coming up from the grasses. As they walked, Tricia said, "Grandma, do you think I'm different?" "Of course," her grandma answered. "To be different is the miracle of life. You see all those little fireflies? Everyone is different. Do you think I'm smart?" Tricia didn't feel smart. Her grandma hugged her. "You are the smartest, quickest, dearest little thing ever." Right then, the little girl felt safe in her grandma's arms. Reading didn't matter so much. Now, Grandma is obviously another very important person to this character. Tricia's grandma used to say that the stars were holes in the sky. They were the light of heaven coming from the other side. And she used to say that someday she would be on the other side where the light comes from. One evening, they lay on the grass together and counted the lights from heaven. "You know," her grandma said, "all of us will go there someday. Hang on to the grass or you'll lift right off the ground and there you'll be." They laughed and both hung on to the grass. But it was not long after that night that her grandma must have let go of the grass because she went to where the lights were on the other side. And not long after that, Tricia's grandpa let go of the grass too. School seemed harder and harder now. Oops, I wasn't showing you that page. Now we're learning how important the passing of her grandparents was to her and how it made her not be as interested in school, and it made school seem harder and harder without her grandparents. Reading was just plain torture. When Sue Ellen read her page or Tommy Bob read his page, they read so easily that Tricia would watch the top of their heads to see if something was happening to their heads that wasn't happening to hers. And numbers were the hardest thing of all to read. She never added anything right. "Line the numbers up before you add them," the teacher would say. But when Tricia tried, the numbers looked like a stack of blocks, wobbly and ready to fall. She just knew she was dumb. Then one day, her mother announced that she had gotten a teaching job in California, a long way from the family farm in Michigan. Even though her grandma and grandpa were gone, the little girl didn't want to move. Maybe, though, the teachers and kids in her new school wouldn't know how dumb she was. She and her mother and brother moved across the country in a two-tone 1949 Plymouth. It took 5 days. But at the new school, it was the same. When she tried to read, she stumbled over words. The cat ran. She was reading like a baby in the 3rd grade. And when her teacher read along with them and called on Tricia for an answer, she gave the wrong answer every time. "Hey, dummy," a boy called out to her on the playground. "How come you are so dumb?" Other kids stood near him and they laughed. Tricia could feel the tears burning in her eyes. how she longed to go back to her grandparents' farm in Michigan. Now, there's a lot of name calling and teasing. And how do you think that makes her feel, that the other kids are calling her names? Think about, how would that make you feel? Turn and tell your learning buddy what you're thinking. Gus, that would make me really sad. It would really hurt my feelings. And especially if they're saying something that I already feel about myself. Now, let's keep reading, thinking about who are the important people and who could have influenced Patricia Polacco to write this story. Now, Tricia wanted to go to school less and less. I have a sore throat, she'd say to her mother, or I have a stomach ache. She dreamed more and more and drew more and more, and she hated, hated, hated school. Then, when Tricia started 5th grade, the school was all abuzz. There was a new teacher. He was tall and elegant. Everybody loved his striped coat and slick gray pants. He wore the neatest clothes. All the usual teacher's pets gathered around him. Stevie Joe and Alice Marie, Davy and Michael Lee. But right from the start, it didn't seem to matter to Mr. Falker which kids were the cutest, or the smartest, or the best at anything. Mr. Falker would stand behind Tricia whenever she was drawing and whisper, "This is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Do you know how talented you are?" When he said this, even the kids who teased her would turn around in their seats and look at her drawings. But they still laughed whenever she gave a wrong answer. Then one day she had to stand up and read, which she hated. She was stumbling through a page in Charlotte's Web, and the page was going all fuzzy when the kids began to laugh out loud. Mr. Falker, in his plaid jacket and his butterfly tie, said, "Stop. Are all of you so perfect that you can look at another person and find fault with her?" Now, let's notice the relationship between Tricia and Mr. Falker, and the importance of having someone to talk to, someone who supports you, who sees the good in you. Who else does Tricia have a relationship like that with? Take some think time. Turn and tell your learning buddy what you're thinking. Rafa, her grandma. So she has her grandma who builds her up and says positive things about her and makes her feel better. And now she has her teacher, Mr. Falker. That's important. Now, we know that this story comes from Patricia Polacco's real life. She really does have dyslexia. She really did struggle as a reader and a writer. But because of the important people in her life, her grandmother and her teacher, Mr. Falker, she grew into an author that has written and illustrated dozens of books. That's, I think, why she wrote this story, is so that you and I as readers can understand that, yes, we all have struggles and obstacles that we have to overcome, but we still can become anything we want, especially if we have the right people in our lives. That was the last day anyone laughed out loud or made fun of her, all except Eric. He sat behind Tricia for 2 whole years, but he seemed almost to hate her. Tricia didn't know why. He waited by the door of the classroom for her and pulled her hair. He waited for her on the playground, leaned in her face, and called her Toad. Tricia was afraid to turn any corner for fear Eric would be there. She felt completely alone. The only time she was really happy was when she was around Mr. Falker. He let her erase the blackboards, only the best students got to do that. He patted her on the back whenever she got something right, and he looked hard and mean at any kid who teased her. But the nicer Mr. Falker was to Tricia, the worse Eric treated her. He got all the other kids to wait for her on the playground or in the cafeteria or even in the bathroom and to jump out and call her stupid or ugly. And Tricia began to believe them. She discovered that if she asked to go to the bathroom just before recess, she could hide under the inside stairwell during the free time and not have to go outside at all. In that dark place, she felt completely safe. But one day at recess, Eric followed her to her secret hiding place. "Have you become a mole?" he laughed, and he pulled her out into the hall and danced around her. "Dumbbell, dumbbell, maggoty old dumbbell." Tricia buried her head in her arms and curled up in a ball. Suddenly, she heard footsteps. It was Mr. Falker. He marched Eric down to the office. When he came back, he found Tricia. "I don't think you'll have to worry about that boy again," he said softly. "What was he teasing you about, little one?" "I don't know," Tricia shrugged. Tricia was sure Mr. Falker believed that she could read. She had learned to memorize what the kid next to her was reading, or she would wait for Mr. Falker to help her with a sentence. Then she'd say the same thing that he did. "Good," he would say. Then one day, Mr. Falker asked her to stay after school and help wash the blackboards. He put on music and brought out little sandwiches as they worked and talked. All at once, he said, "Let's play a game. I'll shout out letters. You write them on the board with the wet sponge as quickly as you can." "A," he shouted. She wiped a watery A. "8," he shouted. She made a watery 8. 14, 3, D, M, Q, he shouted out. He shouted out many, many letters and numbers. Then he walked up behind her, and together they looked at the board. It was a watery mess. Tricia knew that none of the letters or numbers looked like they should. She threw the sponge down and tried to run. But Mr. Falker caught her arms and sank to his knees in front of her. "You poor baby," he said. "You think you're dumb, don't you? How awful for you to be so lonely and afraid." She sobbed. "But, little one, don't you understand? You don't see letters or numbers the way other people do. And you've gotten through school all this time and fooled many, many good teachers." He smiled at her. That took cunning and smartness and such bravery. Then he stood up and finished washing the board. "We're going to change all that, girl. You're going to read. I promise you that." Now, almost every day after school, she met with Mr. Falker and Miss Plessy, a reading teacher. They did a lot of things she didn't even understand. At first, she made circles in sand and then big sponge circles on the blackboard, going from left to right, left to right. Another day, they flicked letters on a screen and Tricia shouted them out loud. Still other days, she worked with wooden blocks and built words. Letters, 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 words, 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 always sounding them out, and that felt good. But though she read words, she hadn't read a whole sentence, and deep down, she still felt dumb. And then one spring day, it had been 3 months or 4 months since they had started, Mr. Falker put a book in front of her. She'd never seen it before. He picked a paragraph in the middle of a page and pointed at it. Almost as if it were magic, or as if light poured into her brain, the words and sentences started to take shape on the page as they never had before. She marched them off to... Slowly, she read a sentence, then another and another, and finally she'd read a paragraph, and she understood the whole thing. She didn't notice that Mr. Falker and Miss Plessy had tears in their eyes. That night, Tricia ran home without stopping to catch her breath. She bounded up the front steps, threw open her front door, and ran through the dining room to the kitchen. She climbed up on the cupboard and grabbed a jar of honey. Then she went into the living room and found the book on a shelf, the very book that her grandpa had shown her so many years ago. She spooned honey onto the cover and tasted the sweetness and said to herself, "The honey is sweet, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee who made the honey. It has to be chased through the pages of the book." Then she held the book, honey and all, close to her chest. She could feel tears roll down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. She was happy, so very happy. The rest of the year became an odyssey of discovery and adventure for the little girl. She learned to love school. I know because that little girl was me, Patricia Polacco. I saw Mr. Falker again some 30 years later at a wedding. I walked up to him and introduced myself. At first he had difficulty placing me. Then I told him who I was and how he had changed my life so many years ago. He hugged me and asked me what I did for a living. Why, Mr. Falker, I answered, I make books for children. Thank you, Mr. Falker. Thank you. Now, this book has such strong emotion. Very, very sad parts, very, very happy parts. And that's part of Patricia Polacco's storytelling, right? She doesn't just include the happy parts. She includes the sad parts as well. And she uses words and illustrations to help tell the story of the people and the people that come from Patricia Polacco's real life. Now, thinking about struggles that have happened and how we have overcome them, how it can help give us inspiration or ideas for our writing. And you can tell Patricia is passionate about the story she shares. She includes lots of important details in her text and in her illustrations. Now, as you go off to do your independent reading, make sure that you're keeping track on your reading log of how long you're reading. And keep in mind that we were learning that Patricia Polacco finds inspirations for her stories from the people and experiences in her real life. So in your writing notebook, I want you to keep track of who are the important people and events in your life, and you're going to start to write about them. And you're also going to write about the main idea and themes in your independent reading texts. And we would love to hear about who is important to you in your life and what are your experiences that you are going to be writing about as an author during this unit. Mr. Kevin, can you tell our third graders how they can send us their work?
Well, certainly. They can send it to TV Classroom at tacoma.k12.wa.us, and you can even do it with audio if you wanted. You could record it and send it as an attachment in email.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Good idea.
Yeah. Or you can, of course, email or mail us something in the regular mail to TV Classroom, 601 South 8th Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98405.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Kevin. Now, third graders, it is time for our affirmation. This is the time when we get to build ourselves up before we go off to do your independent reading and writing. So the affirmation I want you to say to yourself is, I am a strong reader and writer. Say it out loud with me. I am a strong reader and writer. Excellent job today, third graders. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you back here next time in our TV classroom. Bye.
Hey kids, we want to see your work. Just send your pictures and your stories to TV Classroom, 601 South 8th Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98405.